Tariq Ramadan, to me, seems like the perfect example of the moderate. And someone who is so everyday and ordinary, who shares views and sympathies for, modernization and westernization and women's rights. But they are also the sort of people that jump quickly into radical mode. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think they speak to the audience they're speaking to, in the sense that there's not a consistency. I would doubt that what Mr. Ramadan says to a primarily Western, non-Muslim audience is anywhere close to what he says to a Muslim audience. He clearly shares the belief that Islam will eventually become the religion of the world, and indeed is a promoter of that idea. So moderate, the type of moderates the West look for, thoroughly westernized, thoroughly modernized, secular people, they're out there. There's lots of them out there, but they're in no way representative of the Muslim world. I think Ramadan, it's a mistake to think that Mr. Ramadan is in that camp.
In addition to your views on American foreign policy, I also believe that the rising threat that we face from radical Islam comes from an expansionist movement, a sort of a resurrecting the glory of the caliphate and spreading Islam throughout the world. I mean, clearly there is some foreign policy issues here, but I believe at the heart of it, historically, this goes into the sort of rise of the caliphate, global Islamic domination. Would you agree with that or disagree?
I think there is a split within the movement itself. The way I look at things is that bin Laden is representative of more defensive jihad. Clearly they want to take back territories that have been traditionally Muslim and then have become Western or controlled by the West. On the other hand, there's the Muslim Brotherhood. There is especially the Saudi government, who are very clearly expansionists, people who are imperialists almost, in trying to spread a form of Islam that is decidedly anti-Jewish, anti-Christian, anti-Western, and one that does urge the spread of Islam by the word and by the sword. So I think there are two camps. I think at the moment the support of the Muslim world, of the Muslim masses, probably does not fall into the Saudi Muslim Brotherhood camp. It probably does fall into bin Laden's camp. But over time, who knows? The Saudis have been for 35 years proselytizing in almost every country on earth. And so the children that are growing up with a Wahhabi education will be more inclined to be expansionist than defensive. So over time, the threat could very well evolve into more of an offensive threat.
Why do you think that the Muslim persecution of Christians in Muslim majority of nations is underreported in the media?
Well, the Western media, the secular media, is definitely anti-religious, at least anti-Christian. You listen to the BBC, they're clearly anti-Christian. The Washington Post, for example, this vehicle of toleration, is basically an anti-Catholic rag when it comes to reporting any kind of news about Catholicism. So I think their support, their underreporting of the number of Christians that are being killed is simply a function of them not wanting to emphasize Christianity or have any kind of truck, if you will, with Christians. They're bound. They don't want the country becoming angry and eager to help Christians. It just in their eyes builds support for something they hate, which is organized religion.
And Indonesia specifically, which is always being held up as the new model of tolerance and diversity.
Yeah.
I think we've shifted from the old model of Turkey as the model of Islamic progressiveness.
Yeah.
Indonesia has a daily roster of dead bodies piling up in the most atrocious and hideous ways. Young Christian girls being beheaded on the way to school, churches being burned. I think you mentioned something earlier. A friend of yours was in Indonesia. Can you describe this?
Yeah, he was very he was in Indonesia for a couple of years, and he said the growth in anti-Christian attitudes was extraordinary during the time he was there. And he said, you know, after I talked to him after President Obama made his speech and mentioned that Indonesia was the symbol of tolerance. He said there are times in Indonesia where you can drive in your car at night without the lights on, and you're lit up by flaming churches. So the idea that Indonesia is a model of tolerance, if anything, tolerance is becoming less prominent in Indonesia and Malaysia than it was 15 years ago.
Why doesn't Obama address this?
Well, Obama has banned the discussion of any kind of religious motivation behind our enemies. They won't talk about jihad. They won't talk about Islam. Obama sees the world I think he wants to have. He doesn't see the world as it is. And so he has really downplayed the religious portion of this war. And at least for our enemies, this is preeminently a religious war, a war in defense of the faith.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree that this goes back to the inception of Islam. And I think that the world situation in the Middle East, and we will get to Israel momentarily, this is a long history of persecution, of Arab aggression, Islamic imperialism, and expansionism that is continuing to this day. How does this look for the future for the Western world? What are we? I know we're looking at a kind of a gloomy situation, but what can we do if we can do anything? What can we do?
I think we can grow up and become adults again, and realize the power of religion in the modern world is not as diluted as we would like to believe. Islam is a vigorous religion with growing numbers of converts around the world, and to simply pretend that that doesn't exist is a recipe for disaster for us, domestically and in terms of foreign policy. So what can we do? We can do what the founders wanted us to do, and that's to have a society where free speech is dominant, and that a realization that at times free speech means heated and even hateful speech, and nonetheless that has to be tolerated.